There was an idea, Marvel fans know this, called Marvel's Avengers. The idea was to make a remarkable AAA multiplayer games-as-a-service video game starring the Earth's mightiest heroes, and see if this idea could become something more. It could work on paper like we needed it to achieve something we thought video game developers never could, a game in which we could all be the Earth's mightiest heroes, together with our friends and fellow fans. A game that would allow us to lift Mjolnir so we can feel like Thor, to fire a repulsor ray so we can feel like Iron Man, or catch Cap's shield in our own hands. Marvel fans' hopes and dreams died believing in this idea. This idea sounded too good to be true, but even knowing that, no one could have predicted what ended up happening to Marvel's Avengers. I elect to ignore the fact that we should have never gotten our hopes up. Marvel's Avengers is dead. It died when Marvel fans needed it most, as the Marvel Cinematic Universe continues to push onward. No video game coexists alongside the world's beloved cinematic universe. So now that Marvel's Avengers has officially come to an end, it's time for us to discuss the unfortunate failure that is this game. As I said in my overly long intro, Marvel's Avengers should have worked on paper. A multiplayer live service game based around arguably the most popular group of characters in pop culture today, with the new characters being added to the game regularly, is what this game was supposed to be. If you ask me, that does sound like both an amazing experience and a recipe for success on paper. However, that's not what Marvel's Avengers turned out to be. Marvel's Avengers felt like a video game that arrived far too late into the game. Rather than trying to set a new standard for the looter shooter genre, Avengers felt like it was trying to chase what Destiny had already achieved. The looting system was unoriginal and incredibly mind-numbing because regardless of the effects on an item, all you needed was the gear with the higher number. The UI wasn't entirely abysmal, but just like the looting system, it's unoriginal considering it was obvious that Crystal Dynamics wanted to make their own iteration of Destiny's UI. The Avengers themselves faced a common complaint regarding the gameplay side of things, which is that they weren't as fun to play as during the early portions of the game. Finally, it rapidly became clear that Crystal Dynamics had to pivot from the original vision of Marvel's Avengers. No, not the original vision that they were probably thinking of internally. I'm talking about the original vision that they sold to us before the pandemic happened and before the game was released.
Marvel's Avengers delivers a narrative over multiple years, with exciting new content released at a regular basis.
Marvel's Avengers did deliver a narrative, and yes, the narrative did technically span over multiple years. However, the content they released has rarely been exciting outside of War for Wakanda, nor was it ever released regularly. To give you a better look at the basis of which content was released for this game, let's start from the top. Marvel's Avengers was supposed to release on May 15th, 2020. The game was delayed for several months and ended up releasing on September 4th, 2020. Naturally, this was upsetting and concerning to a lot of people, but game development is hard, so I absolutely get it. The game met its new release date of September 4th. However, 1 month after launch, there was a delay that immediately set the tone for what Marvel's Avengers ended up being. Operation Taking Aim and the AIM Cloning Labs, which was supposed to be the late game raid for Marvel's Avengers, got indefinitely delayed. Operation Taking Aim, which was supposed to release 1 month after the game's release so we could immediately enjoy a brand new Avenger, didn't release until December 8th, 2020. While I personally did enjoy Kate Bishop's gameplay style and overall storyline, the story was only 4 hours long. It didn't help that, for some reason, the developers of this game thought it'd be a great idea to release another Archer 3 months later on March 18th, 2021 with Operation Future Imperfect. That, of course, starred Hawkeye, who also had a fairly compelling storyline. To put that into perspective, from September 4th, 2020 to March 18th, 2021, Crystal Dynamics released 2 incredibly similar characters that were both delayed. These characters' storyline added pretty much nothing to the game outside of giving the Avengers more reason to continue killing the same enemies we were already dealing with in the main story, which were aimbots for whatever reason. reason. There was supposed to be something released thanks to Operation Future Imperfect known as Patrol Mode, but that never came to fruition despite Crystal Dynamics announcing it in 2021. Fast forward a full 5 months later, filled with fans begging for a roadmap, very few content updates, no big in-game events, and no reasons to boot up Marvel's Avengers. Crystal Dynamics finally released the only big expansion that this game ended up getting, which was Black Panther: War for Wakanda on August 17th, 2021. Finally, a new location, a new major character, and new enemy types were all introduced in War for Wakanda. Except, this expansion was missing one major thing: a new faction. The Avengers, love it or not, were still fighting the most uninteresting enemies known to man, aimbots. That was not only incredibly disappointing, but it was incredibly frustrating. From this point on, the game only got 3 more Avengers added to the roster. Spider-Man was released 3 months after War for Wakanda on November 30th, 2021, except he was exclusive to PlayStation consoles and played worse than he did in Marvel's Spider-Man. The Mighty Thor, who was basically a clone of Thor, was released 6 months after Spider-Man on June 28th, 2022, to coexist with Thor: Love and Thunder. Finally, 5 months later, Marvel's Avengers had its most random release with Winter Soldier, which reminds me, hey, remember that cloning labs thing I mentioned earlier? You know, the thing that was supposed to arrive close to launch just like Kate Bishop's Operation Taking Aim release? Yeah, well, guess what? That cloning labs thing was released with Bucky on November 29th, 2022. That's over 2 years after it was originally supposed to be released. Now, the reason I'm pointing all of this out is that Marvel's Avengers was supposed to be a multiplayer games as a service video game. That means it was supposed to be a live service video game, as in a video game that's supposed to consistently get updates to keep it alive. You know, the same type of game that gives players a constant reason to want to come back and play that said game. A poor release schedule aside, the fact that Marvel's Avengers was a games as a service game without the service part is arguably the biggest reason why it ultimately failed. I think I can speak for a lot of the longtime supporters, ex-supporters, and Marvel fans in general when I say you can only get so much enjoyment out of beating up aimbots for the 100th time. However, Crystal Dynamics could have absolutely done things to make it a little more exciting every now and then through in-game events. And yes, before I go through this section of the video, I'm fully aware that everything I'm about to say is easier said than done. I'm also fully aware that making video games is incredibly difficult. I don't want to downplay that. However, what I am trying to highlight is how big of a difference a small idea would have impacted a struggling game like Marvel's Avengers. Just to play devil's advocate, let's say for the sake of this conversation that the #1 reason Crystal Dynamics couldn't pivot from the AIM storyline is because of the higher-ups at Disney. Let's say that, for some odd reason, Disney restricted what Crystal Dynamics could or couldn't do with this game. There were ways to still keep bringing people back to Marvel's Avengers despite the lack of variety in this game. For instance, why weren't there any fun limited time events in Marvel's Avengers? No, I'm not talking about the Red Room takeover or repeating the same mission over and over again. I'm talking about maybe a handful of new missions that tell a very short storyline that's like an hour or so, centered around the idea of building upon the relationships of already existing characters every now and then. Those missions could have even been restricted to just 2 Avengers, so the entire cast didn't need to do new voice lines. For example, why not give a reason for Bruce and Kamala to go out and clear some missions together, with the mission storyline ultimately ending with a brand new cutscene that reminds us why their chemistry was so good in the main story? Why not give a reason for Tony and Cap to go out and team up together as we get to watch them banter with each other as we beat up aimbots? Why wasn't there a mission designed around both Thors that ultimately ends with them both using Mjolnir and Stormbreaker as a way to give a nod to the MCU? If these ideas are incredibly difficult, why weren't there new character-specific missions every now and then to at least continue building upon these iconic characters that people do genuinely care about, and to give us a reason to revisit characters that people may have not played commonly? What makes even less sense is the lack of holiday events from Marvel's Avengers. No, really, why weren't there any limited time holiday events? Sure, one could argue that, hey, they did make Halloween skins, give them credit. If that's your answer to, here's how you should spend your holidays playing our game, then honestly, that's a downright awful response. As someone who's played MMOs like DC Universe Online, RuneScape, and Final Fantasy XIV, I can say without a doubt that people enjoy sinking their time into those types of games around the holidays and game-specific events because their time is validated. The same thing applies to live service games such as Fortnite, Apex Legends, or League of Legends. The excitement that people get from these yearly scheduled events is unparalleled because the rewards are usually worth having in some capacity. Whether it's being rewarded with a new pet such as a reindeer, a new set of emotes, new Christmas themed furniture for your in-game house, or new holiday based cosmetics that are limited to that year because the game gets new holiday cosmetics yearly, these rewards give people a reason to not only play the game but to look forward to these events every single year. Are some events going to be better or worse than the previous year? Sure, that's just how it is sometimes. But the fact that there was not a single limited time holiday event for Marvel's Avengers blows my mind. I can't understate this enough. There are so many missed opportunities from this game not doing any sort of limited time events. For example, why wasn't there a Halloween event centered around any Avenger convincing the rest of the Avengers to take the night off so they can decorate either the Quinjet or a specific headquarters of Crystal Dynamics choosing with Halloween decorations? Whatever Avenger you play as has to talk to each Avenger, and that ultimately leads to each Avenger participating and putting up decorations. After all of the decorations are put up, there's a fun cutscene of the Avengers having the Halloween party, which shows everyone dancing, laughing, and having fun, but it ends with them watching a generic scary Halloween movie. The rewards? Free Halloween decorations to put around the Quinjet for the following years and several Halloween costumes. Something like that is not only a simple and small idea, but it also gives people a break from dealing with aimbots for once. Christmas is a bigger deal, so of course it would have deserved something bigger like a small questline based around one concept. The Avengers save Christmas because AIM wants to bring an end to Christmas for whatever reason. Again, all of this is easier said than done, but the point I'm trying to make here is that Marvel's Avengers lacked any of the interesting or engaging content needed to make the game feel like a live service game. Even if Crystal Dynamics did totally different timed events for the holidays or was inspired by things going on in the MCU, the point stands that when you make a live service game, you need to reward your players. They should get something for their investments they put into the game. These limited time events speak to two direct audiences that these developers needed to speak to. The first audience is the players who still were playing the game despite if the game was dead, or at least had a decaying player base. Making an event that engages with the same people who still have hopes for your game and still want to see your game succeed is so incredibly important. It comes off as a thank you for still playing and supporting our game more than anything else, which makes those same hardcore dedicated players feel appreciated. The second audience these timed events speak to are the people who are waiting for a reason to finally come back and play the game. After all those days, weeks, or months passing by, a legitimately cool event would have given those players who were waiting for a reason to boot up the game a reason to finally check back in and see what was going on. Instead, Crystal Dynamics seemed to publicly be focused on one thing and one thing only. That one thing? publicly ignoring the community's feedback, complaints, or concerns so they can primarily focus on highlighting skins to try and turn a profit. This has nothing to do with the developers who are passionately working on the animations, gameplay, or features of Marvel's Avengers. This has to do with the people at the top who were able to choose what did or did not come to this game and had other people communicate these things to the audience. The lack of communication was so inexcusable that I can't even begin to explain how ridiculous this entire situation was. You can't make a live service game and not serve your community. The community shouldn't have had to fight tooth and nail for a simple roadmap, because not only did they want to know what was coming to the game, but they deserved to know what was coming to the game. Just to remind everyone, Marvel's Avengers wasn't a free-to-play game with pay-to-win elements. People paid for it. People used their hard-earned money to play a game based on characters they absolutely adore, with hopes that even if it launched in a poor state, things would eventually get back on track. For some unknown reason, the entire community was ignored for almost the entirety of this game's lifespan. This is why Marvel's Avengers failed. Yes, all of the other reasons and things I've pointed out in this video played a massive role in the unfortunate failure of this game, but nothing stands out more than the lack of communication. As a live service game, you have to communicate with your fans. You have to answer questions, complaints, and concerns, even if it requires a generic answer. You have to engage with the audience who love and hate your game, so it not only gets better, but so the community feels like they're playing a role in making the game better as well. Plus, it validates the time and money that the player has invested into the game. This is where Crystal Dynamics failed this massive IP, failed this video game, and failed their community. They spent an overwhelming majority of this game's life ignoring their community, failing to meet promised deadlines, failing to deliver any hope for the future of this game, failing this IP, and failing their community. Instead, again, the higher-ups were focused on promoting MCU skins on almost every social media platform with the hopes of trying to use that to turn a profit. On paper, Marvel's Avengers had the recipe for success, centering a game around arguably the most popular characters in pop culture today. Check. Being a multiplayer game that allows friends or strangers to team up as these characters to complete missions together. Check. Aiming to be a live service game with constant content drops, character releases, and more. Check. Unfortunately though, this game was failed by the higher-ups of Crystal Dynamics. The inability to meet promised content deadlines put a spin on an already multiple-year-old trend, and communicating with their community is what led to the unfortunate failure of Marvel's Avengers. Unlike Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, which capitalized on the post-Avengers Endgame hype train and turned out to be a pretty good game, Marvel's Avengers was unable to capitalize on any of its potential. In my opinion, this game is going to go down as one of the biggest what-ifs in video game history. What if Marvel's Avengers succeeded? What if Marvel's Avengers had centered its content around the Marvel Cinematic Universe? How long would it have been supported? How big could it have gotten? Those are questions that we'll never get an answer to, and it's always going to be an unfortunate case of what could have been. I may not miss Marvel's Avengers a couple of weeks, months, or years from now, but I'm sure whenever that conversation comes back around, I'll always be thinking about what an incredibly missed opportunity this game was.